ahead and share with you, if I can figure out some of the work that we have done and are hoping to do. So just to give you, I'll go ahead and share this one first. So this is the document. Nope, that's not the right one. Try that again. Are you seeing the thing that says payer strategies?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay. Yeah, so this is sort of the format that they're hoping to collect our responses in and sort of put for the website. So across all of the working groups, everybody's going to be sort of putting their thoughts and agenda items into this format, and then they'll put that on the website so that there's some level of standardization. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint slide after we go through this that sort of highlights what we've done so far and where we're thinking about going, just from additional context, but I just wanted to throw this up here. So the executive summary from the payer strategies work group is that financial sustainability is one of the key, if not the key, challenge in digital pathology and machine learning AI applications in digital diagnostic pathology. Payers need conclusive and definitive clinical outcomes and clinical utility data. The return on investment for digital pathology solutions has not been conclusively shown. Other key challenges include that clinical utility studies are costly but necessary, and that effective integration of digital pathology into existing clinical decision-making guidelines is a long-term process. The work group is focusing on best practices to understand coverage determination pathways and is currently planning on a second white paper. We already published one to incorporate digital pathology into clinical practice guidelines. That other white paper that is referenced there is something that we published in the journal Precision Medicine in December of last year on aligning reimbursement for digital pathology with its value, essentially just laying out some of the key stakeholders and value add to each of those, and outlining sort of where each of the stakeholders in this area can contribute and where needs need to be or can be met. So some of the things that we lined up here under key elements, next steps, probably won't go in so much to the timeline. Hi, Carla, how are you?
Good to Hi there, I jumped into the wrong room, sorry.
No worries, no worries. I'm just, was just discussing our white paper that we published and starting to go through this document, which is going to be what we're going to add all of our edits to and things so that we can get this up on the website as an updated sort of prospectus and agenda for the pathology PIcc. So you can see the executive summary there, but key elements that we were going to just, were sort of laid out in this document include that need to include payers in these conversations to better understand pain points from their perspectives, educate medical directors of the health plans, consider population health analysis and focus on individual diseases, reviewing non-pathology approaches as sort of a pathway to follow for digital pathology, and considering payment, not necessarily in the payer specifically related area, but considering how bundled payments could potentially be a way to get around this sort of like efficiency versus increased payment issue, which I'll talk about in a minute. So concerns, problems, and key questions that were outlined, including the fact that if you present pathology as a quote increased efficiency methodology, that's the value add, it's because it increases efficiency and cost, then payers return with the statement that, well, then we shouldn't have to pay you as much if you're saving money. It doesn't cost as much to utilize these surfaces. So that then led the past groups from our previous working groups to decide that Maybe there need to be some more IH use cases that could replace billable units, a road to revenue to monetize ML and AI, and then determining who is going to pay for clinical utility studies, given that there's a high cost to implementation of AI or of digital pathology. So what's the value proposition here? Efficiency gain, as I mentioned, just is interpreted as cost savings to payers. There's also going to be a workforce gap, as we're seeing fewer pathologists enter the field with with those that are there beginning to retire. Potentially there needs to be an economic impact study or something to study, how time to diagnosis is impacted by the implementation of digital pathology. And in the last section on implications and efforts, trying to figure out how many laboratories are currently doing this, how has COVID impacted that, aligning the importance of data and the type of data to labs, payers, patients. Hey, Esther.
Hi.
And yeah, making it labs more independent, considering the cost of storage and maintenance for implementing digital pathology, and then what is the value of data in this medical health development ecosystem. Esther, so I just kind of ran through some of the key points that we have in this document here that we're planning on putting onto, will ultimately inform what goes on the website. Is there anything maybe from your perspective that you wanted to add? I was also going to share the slide that we put together.
Yeah, thanks. I just came off from another group where we were with 2 persons, and the pathologist really wants to learn more about digital pathology. So I thought it was better if he would move to another group because he was just observing. So I missed your intro, but I think what would be great, we developed our paper. And based on our paper, we identified some next steps. But also based on what we discussed, I think last year, if I remember correctly, this is really what we came up with back then. Like what is really, what do we need? What are the key elements? So I think it's really, what I hear all the time coming back is that we really want to show what is the added value of digital pathology instead of really reducing the costs. So I think that should be our focus. We now have that great paper, and how can we build upon that? And yeah, for myself, I think the next steps is, as you already indicated, Laura, there are a few tangible ones that we can address. It's really about collecting some data, maybe. Thanks. And we said we can come up with some real world data. We can come up with some comparison studies, some retrospective studies, utilize new reimbursement codes. That's something that we could do. But of course, it's also of the interest of this group who's participating here, what we could do. So now I'll pause there because otherwise I'm speaking. I have some thoughts, but I really want to hear what you're thinking. And also good to see you, Eric. Eric and I had a discussion a couple of weeks ago about reimbursement and next steps. So yeah, maybe you could all share what you're thinking. What would be low-hanging fruits? What's midterm and what's long-term? And what would we as a group can work on?
I have a question, as I sit in Sweden, and I'm not that much on a day-to-day basis what's going on in the US, but have you received any feedback on the white paper from any of other institutions, like insurance companies and so on? what any comments whatsoever?
No, not from institutions or something, but more on LinkedIn that people responded. I don't know whether you received anything, Laura or Carmen?
No, nothing specifically, other than just like, great job.
Yeah, there was a good amount of comments on LinkedIn. Yeah, I think we've had a couple of conversations with insurance companies at Page, and they're intrigued. But I think it seems like what we have right now is not quite enough for them to be more than intrigued. Is kind of like my overall takeaway from some of those very early conversations, when they're like, oh, how can we, and insurance companies, what they want to do is lower their costs, right? So there's not full alignment there. But I think they're paying attention to the space in general, but I don't think they've made any concrete decisions or anything like that. At least nothing that I've seen.
Yeah. One of the things that we could do is we can, for example, start collecting some real world data if we want to as a group, use our pathologists. So maybe compare already what they're doing right now, compare it to what they have collected in the past, and how digital pathology can make the difference, right? I think that's really about the comparison between the standard of care and the new paradigm shift that we're introducing. What does it do? That's something we could do, because I think if we are going to apply for a new code, that will take a long time. That's for me really a long-term strategy. So it's more like, what do we have right now, and what was it in the past, and can we use some pathologists in our team for that, to collect that data? But then it's of course also, how do you collect it? And maybe Eric, could I ask you, because you've been working for some payers. So are there like high standards with regards to how much evidence you would need, how reliable it should be, how accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I can provide some, I think, insights to that overall, because so when I was on the payer side and engaging with the diagnostic companies in the marketplace, most payers will have their own individual evidence assessment frameworks by which they evaluate technologies. So essentially, each of the whether it's Medicare, which is a public payer, or the commercial private payers, they each have their own what we call the medical policy committees, where they do that full dive into the literature or the evidence for a particular technology, and then ultimately come to I think assessment of whether the technology improves outcomes. So that's always the threshold or the bar you have to meet in order to get a new technology or application of the technology covered. So when I would engage with like the large diagnostic companies currently in the marketplace, like Foundation Medicine, Garden Health, they would try to come to the payers and say, hey, you know what, our test does XYZ, but then the payers will just say, well, how does it actually improve outcomes? Like, you're telling me what it does, but where's your proof that actually utilizing your test actually somehow improves outcomes? So I think one initial step for I think PICC is to just be able to lay out that I think that pathway or that understanding to help the all the folks within PICC understand what that roadmap or pathway is to generate the type of evidence a payer is going to want. Because the other big challenge is that the payer market is very, very fragmented. There are 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 different payers. And so you need to engage with each of them separately. Each of them may have different standards. But two of the, some of the large national ones are like United. The Blue system is like covers a third of the US population, Medicare. So it's just an important thing to help, I think, our members just understand what that landscape is like and how to begin to navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. So that would be a first step, right? That we first start to identify maybe all the different, that's a lot, all the different payers I wanted to say, but just a few key ones. And then
I would
identify
say just a few key ones. Yeah. And then, certain payers will have some frameworks available for, I think, the industry to be able to review and understand. So at least we're all beginning to speak the same language, because when I was on the payer side, the diagnostic companies would be trying to make an argument, but it doesn't fit into our framework or construct. So we can, on the payer side, engage with you and talk with you about what you wish to talk about. But if it doesn't meet our standards or our framework, we're just kind of talking past each other, right? Like, the diagnostic companies or like PIcc would be trying to make a point, but it's not relevant for the payer. So just making sure we're in alignment with the language and kind of the framework that we want to proceed with would be beneficial, because that's, I would say, was one of the biggest challenges. Because we would, I would be the one to say, well, your study, had this, you want us to conclude that, but that's not the conclusion our independent, scientific committee and medical directors concluded. So you have your opinion, but we have our framework. We're the ultimate decision makers. So if you don't understand our framework and you want us to conclude or interpret the study the way you want us to, we have to do it independently ourselves. And so that's why we get into very circular arguments, or not really arguments, because at the end of the day, the payers do not, I think, just change our conclusions or opinion based on what like the industry or a diagnostic company would want to say, but it's really incumbent upon I think the industry to really understand what you need to do to prove to a payer in order to get some sort of coverage and reimbursement.
Yeah. So that you can easily find that, if I hear you correctly, you can easily find those standards at their websites maybe or something, or?
No, yeah, that's a great question. It's typically a black box, but where I worked when I was at the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association is we represented the 36 Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, and the 36 plans cover about 107 million lives in the US, about 1/3 of the US population. The design for our health technology assessment division, which we called Evidence Street, is to try to bring some of that transparency to the marketplace. So I can specifically say, for the Blue Cross Blue Shield system, that those standards by which we do the evaluations are publicly available. And I can probably put it in the chat for the group here. So, but most other payers, because before I joined the payer side, I was actually at a genetic testing company, Ambry Genetics. So I would try to engage with the other national payers. So I was kind of on the side we're on now together, but I was, before I joined the payer side, but most of the payers are going to have a closed system. They will not tell you what standards, how they make the decision, who the decision makers are. And so it's basically a black box, I would say, for most payers. But what we did on the Evidence Street side for the Blue Cross Blue Shield system would serve as a pretty good, I would say, reference point for understanding how these technology assessments and subsequent policies are made. Yeah,
I still have difficulties. I hear what you're saying, and I think that's the first step that we should do, is like a few key ones, take them, and then also think about what is it that they really would like to get as evidence. So that, oh, there you go. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, so just so if you want to open that link, let me direct you to the actual framework. So this is publicly available. So who's the presenter?
Oh, for me, it says not found. Yeah. Laura is showing her screen. Yeah.
Laura, can you open the link?
Are you able to click on that, or do you need to click on? Let me know, because it took me. Let me know if that link works.
And when I click on it, it says not found. Yeah.
Okay, so let me try the more general one. Yeah, so I think what happens is once you click through, it gives you a unique one. So Laura, go ahead and click on that link, and then I'll direct you to where. Okay, so that should take you to the landing page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that works now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then go to the upper blue bar. There should be reviews. Scroll over to the right of the browser screen. Yeah, is there a bar at the bottom or no?
Oh, it's higher up. All the way
Higher up at the very, very top.
And then to the side, go to the right because you're not showing your whole.
You could share your screen as well, Eric, if that's easier.
Sure, no, she's close. So it's home, and then
go.
next to home, if you go over a little bit more, it'll say reviews. Like the white home. Here, I can pull it up if it's easier for everyone.
Here, let me just give you, if I can. I think I have to stop share.
Yeah, let me see if I can share the screen. Oh, disabled. So if you can somehow give me permission, I'll be able to share it. Or sorry, I'll be able to share my screen.
Yeah. I'm not seeing where I can do that, actually.
Well, you were pretty close, Laura. It was basically at the very top of the screen. It said home, but if you are somehow able to scroll over on the screen a little bit more, the home button, if you go a little more to the right.
Let's see if that helps. There we go.
Yeah, right there, review. Now, if you click on review, that's where it is. So the public framework or templates are in that column where you see the down arrow. It says right next to test or therapy. Those are the two different frameworks we utilize. So for us, it would probably be test. So if you click on the down arrow icon, that has the framework that we utilize when I was at Blue Cross.
Let's see if here we go.
Yeah, so if you open that's basically I think you captured a lot of the elements of that in the white paper for some of the, I guess, the proof points or the evidence that Payor is looking for, but this is just kind of a direct way to think about it.
So Eric, why does everybody keep it so black box?
They don't like to set very rigorous standards, or not that they don't want to set rigorous standards, but each payer has their own experts that they leverage, because in the circumstances where the evidence is kind of in that gray area where it's like pretty promising but not quite there yet, different payers, depending on who their key opinion leaders or subject matter experts are, can make that decision and say, well, you know what, this is good enough for us. It's not quite there, but we have enough input from the experts that we trust to go ahead and decide to cover it. So each payer, whether it's Medicare or the commercial private payers, ultimately take in additional considerations beyond just purely this framework that's here. But this framework is kind of that basis or common ground that I would say almost all payers utilize in one form or another to begin that upfront evidence assessment process. Then that final decision on whether to cover a new or novel technology also takes an additional consideration. So when I was on the evidence tree side, what we would say is this is just purely assessment of the evidence, what the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association determines or has concluded with our experts and our scientists and clinical staff, but this is not medical policy. So that final medical policy piece that really gates and determines whether something is covered or not has additional considerations beyond purely what's just in this framework. So for a lot of the other payers, they just say, it's too complicated. We can't give you a framework that will guarantee you coverage. But for us on the Blue Cross Blue Shield side, we wanted to try to be as transparent as possible. Say, these are the data within the different publications, how we've kind of pulled out the information, right? Whether we're talking about concordance, sensitivity, specificity, PPV, NPV, so on and so forth. And so but yeah, I can't speak for the other payers, but if you had to ask me, that's probably why. Like, because we would have situations where we concluded the evidence is insufficient that a technology is improved or medical technology is improving medical outcomes. However, the local Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, some of them may think it's good enough to start coverage, right? So we are trying to disentangle the evidence review or the health technology assessment component with the final policy coverage component, because there's additional layer on top of that, but that's beyond, I think, the standard HTA, health technology assessment process. I'll just pause there to see if that kind of makes sense or not.
Yeah, it does.
Excuse me for being Swedish and not understanding the US system, but how many of those black boxes are there that you need to go through?
Hundreds.
Hundreds.
If you want every single possible person in the US covered, it would be literally hundreds. So yeah. I'll just give an example. So where I was at the association level is we represented the system or the Blue Cross Blue Shield brand, but within that system, there's actually already 36 individual health insurance companies under our umbrella. So just within the Blues, there's 36. And then you add on all the other ones out in the marketplace. And if you want to get reimbursement for a particular patient, you have to see what insurance company they have and make sure that their particular product or medical insurance that they have does cover the technology. So it's, like I said, it's very, very, very fragmented here. We do not have a single payer system.
And they don't talk to each other either. I mean, all those experts that they are using, they don't talk to each other or have comparison.
I would say we try to benchmark with each other. But that's why where I was within the Blue system, since we are very influential, we cover about 107 million, or when I was at the Blues, we covered 107 million lives. That was 1/3. So a lot of the company or industry representative would try to engage with us because some of the other smaller health insurance plans would want to see what we did, right? And then if we typically tend to be more conservative because we cover such a large footprint, but then for some of the smaller insurance companies, they may be a little more progressive because of not covering as many patients, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just purely, mitigating that risk. Like you want to make sure you're pulling in enough insurance premiums to cover all the costs of the insurance claims you're paying out. And so every health plan has their own, I think, financial calculation too, that is never made public. But I would say if we're able to just share, I mean, this is, you guys are able, or this work group was able to download this. So just basically just being able to share that with the rest, like as a way, or maybe we can compile it or make it a little more streamlined to help everyone, in PICC understand what is actually needed to, create some of this evidence to secure some sort of enhanced or premium reimbursement.
Yeah, and for diagnostics, is a surrogate for outcomes acceptable? Like if we say we improve the accuracy of this or the consistency of that, do you still need to follow the patients for a certain amount of time to prove improved outcomes? I mean, I know Foundation Medicine took, $500 million to build their evidence to get a CPT code and get it reimbursed, right? Is there something that's acceptable, but that's not that?
Yeah, you know what? So short answer is no, because the way Foundation is getting coverage is very, very specific uses. So, their Foundation 1 CDX test right now is basically only covered when those specific criteria are met. So the way I think that at a high level, the way I think about it is, are you talking about trying to get coverage for a broad technology? Because before I kind of joined the payer side, I was on the molecular genetic testing side, right? I worked at Illumina and then Ambry Genetics. So initially the diagnostic companies on the molecular diagnostic space were trying to push, oh, you know what, you need to cover NGS, next gen sequencing. You just need to cover that. But that is not the language that the payers are thinking about. They're like, how exactly are you applying the technology? What is the population? What is the specific test you're doing? What standard of care are you comparing it to? And can you show that you're having a better outcome? So it's kind of captured in this test framework that we have up on the screen. So
right.
We need to be as specific and as narrow for each of these specific indications for you. So similar to NGS is where I see, or where digital pathology is probably where NGS was about 8 to 10 years ago, right? It's a new technology that's in the marketplace, but it takes a lot of time to really understand and figure out what specific use case or indication for use you're trying to address, utilizing the technology. And then that's the only way you can make some headway with the payers.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's also something around like, an MRI machine is not reimbursed, but there is reimbursement included in the technical component whenever a radiologist reads an MRI, right? And so I don't know if that's a better way to go here, like just broadly for digital pathology and software on top of that, whether it has AI or other things. Because I think a lot of us know that pathology labs don't have huge budgets, and this capital equipment is not covered right now. So I don't know if that could be a broad way to approach things.
Yeah, I would say it is, at least in the current space. Let me see if I can send you guys another link real fast. So this is just so everyone is aware of, for any insurance company that's in the private or commercial space, they are required to kind of post their medical policies publicly, right? So if you buy, say, Anthem Insurance, or if you buy United Insurance, you need to know exactly what's covered and what's not. And so let me just give you a quick example if you're able to click on the link, Laura.
This one, let me go ahead and stop them.
Let me know if that link opens for you.
And I'm gonna go back to Chrome. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is an example where you have to really drill down on exactly what you're trying to prove. And so, because we were talking about foundation medicine and foundation CDX, right? Foundation One CDX. And so, but the way the payers are going to do it is what application of Foundation One CDX would actually be covered. So it can't just be any patient with cancer can get comprehensive genomic profiling, right? You have to be as specific as what cancer type, and then what's the purpose. So in this particular policy that I'm sharing with you guys, it's you can use any test you want, whether it's comprehensive genomic profiling or individual, single biomarker testing. But what the payers are saying is this is what biomarker of interest we're willing to cover. And so for something like digital pathology, you have to say, what is it that we're trying to identify, and for what particular cancer type, and and is that particular biomarker or whatever thing you're trying to detect, able to link to some sort of outcome. So actually, I think I have a better one, but that's only. Sorry, I grabbed the wrong one to show people.
And can you then, Eric, can you then also use publications, or do you have, because most of the time payers really are getting it also from local hospitals, and not necessarily from people like us, like a collaborative community, right? So how do you compile all this data and send it to them, and also at the same time use it to serve the CMS questions, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that the simplest answer is payers will first only look at the primary evidence, right? What's been peer reviewed, what's been published first and foremost. And that gives you that initial benchmark or conclusion for kind of where the state of that particular technology or the application of the technology is. And then there will be some local considerations, right? So say, Path AI that's based in Boston, they'll talk with Harvard or MGH, MassGen, and other hospital systems around. And then if there's a really strong demand and a lot of experts in that field that are trying to work with the health plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts may come to a different conclusion than where I'm currently living, which is in California, which is, Blue Cross or Blue Shield of California may make a different conclusion because the local regional factors may be enough to tip the decision in one way in one market, whereas in a different market, it may not. And so that's kind of where, the common ground is that initial assessment, that framework that we had up on the screen, and then additional considerations come into play at that local level. So that's kind of how you can begin to think through navigating it. So you have to be very specific in what markets you're navigating, where the geographic presence for each of the different payers are, and then begin to do that. So that's why I said it's very, very complicated because it's such a fragmented market. So even within the Blue system, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arkansas may come to a different conclusion than Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, which may have a different conclusion than Blue Shield of California, right? So you need to basically reinvent the wheel every single time you engage with a payer.
Yeah. And from that perspective, it would be great if we get CMS involved straight away. But hearing all this, I think that's my opinion. I don't know what others think, but hearing this and also looking at how CMS works with their CPT codes, that's going to take at least like 2-3 years to get a new code even. How long does it generally take for local?
Yeah, and so you have a good point with CMS, because for CMS, the way we think about it on the private payer side is that CMS just pays for everything, or CMS is the most liberal or progressive in terms of covering technology, because at least for CMS, for some of the local Medicare administrative contractors, right, that the MACs, which cover certain regions, I can't remember exactly how many there are, but there's I think about 6 or 7 Medicare administrative contractors. They are able to provide LCDs, which we call local coverage determinations. And so even within CMS, you might have some variability. The only way to get broad coverage or coverage by Medicare is to have what we call NCD, which is a national coverage determination, which basically means everyone across the entire country that has Medicare for their health insurance can get this. So NCDs are much more difficult to obtain. A lot of the earlier stage diagnostic companies are more likely to secure a local coverage determination, or LCD, and that's typically done through the Moldex. Palmetto GBA is like the administrative contractor, and the Moldex program is the one that certain other MACs across the country have said they will align with, but basically even within Medicare, there is some fragmentation and some local decisions.
Yeah.
So are you guys familiar with the Moldex system?
Not familiar, but I've heard about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just put the link there. So Moldex is a program that certain other Medicare contractors have agreed to align with. And so Moldex is similar to where I was at the association, where we would provide kind of a reference document, and then Moldex is kind of doing a similar process for Medicare, but then it's up to each of the local jurisdictions on whether they wish to align with Medicare, or sorry, with the Moldex Palmetto GBA conclusion. And so that's another good benchmark, but Moldex LCDs are going to be have broader coverage or more liberal coverage because they're willing to cover technologies that don't have that, I think, slam dunk or proven clinical utility. There's just enough promising information or evidence that, you know, Medicare or Moldex will cover it. But the way to think about it is that it is just a provisional coverage, because within the LCDs or the local coverage determinations, it says this continued coverage is contingent upon, you know, generation of further evidence, right? So, you know, there are examples of where Moldex has covered a particular test or technology, and then 3 or 4 years later revoke that, you know, coverage because the subsequent, I guess, confirmatory studies, if we want to use like that FDA framework, didn't actually prove out that it was able to improve outcomes. And so, but that's would be the, I would say, the most straightforward entry point, because this is I guess the threshold or the evidence bar isn't quite as high, because Moldex is willing to cover technologies even when not all the evidence is fully formed or ready.
Yeah, that's interesting too, that we might be able to start with that in parallel, start working with the local payers maybe, and then the longer term would be CMS.
Yeah, I guess my question
an approach
for the group is like, what is it that we're trying to seek from the payers? Because if I had if I pretended like I was still on the payer side, I would, you know, ask them general questions. I said, well, you know, you're a pathology lab, you know, you have your pathologists doing this already. If you want to implement a new technology and gain some efficiencies from that, go ahead and do it yourself. But I don't need to change my reimbursement structure, you know, for you, right? Like any efficiencies or cost savings, you can just, you know, recoup yourself. So what is it that you're asking for? Because we know what the baseline reimbursement, you know, for the CPT codes are, right? You know, 88305, which is for evaluation of biopsies, is for 2021, $73.51, and larger surgical cases will incrementally go up, right? So I would say, if I was on the payer side, this is the payment rate or my payment structure. If you want to use that technology, feel free to do so in the laboratory. But what is it that you're asking of me to do? Are you trying to ask for a premium reimbursement? If I'm paying, you know, $73.51 for a biopsy review, how much more are you trying to ask for? Like, what is it that you want, right? So that's what I think most payers would just say, here's my payment structure. If you want to, you know, apply digital pathology, you know, if the lab wants to, go ahead. Any benefits you keep yourself, but here's my payment structure. So what is my incentive for changing my payment structure or creating a new code?
Yeah, that's a good point, because actually right now it's more based on, and that's what I feel, it's more like add-on, right? You're compiling things and then you say, oh, let's take a biopsy, let's do a stain of this, let's do a stain of that, and you add all these different codes. But I think that's what we're trying to do with digital pathology, by saying, well, actually, by now indeed evaluating an entire biopsy by algorithms or using digital pathology, this is what you're saving, but also this is what it brings to the patients. They're getting like faster turnaround times, treatments early, and that sort of things. So I think that we need to show what the change in standards of care will be, and that will be very hard at this moment, because there's nothing really in published in papers. Also, not really with regards to how much more efficient can you be with digital pathology compared to microscopes. The only thing that you can see is that, yeah, we're almost equal as to microscope. So indeed, what is then the added value that they say compared to evaluating a biopsy using a microscope, right? Why should I change it? I think that's a fair thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I've definitely been trying to approach it, the question that way. And if I can, you know, maybe say it slightly differently, it's sort of like, the issue is that there's a lot of upfront costs. So just swapping it out for the standard way and then recouping savings later isn't optional, because most labs don't have the funds to implement the system up front. So in order to even get it into the lab, we're going to have to see that increased add-on payment, whatever, a boost in reimbursement. So what is, and I think we've established that long-term outcomes is not a feasible study to do unless it's in a very, very specific, you know, biomarker or, you know, indication specific setting. So then what is sort of the nearest, I think as Carla mentioned, like surrogate endpoint, like what's a proxy endpoint that would be acceptable to support added reimbursement without having to go full-fledged clinical utility study?
Well, a clinical utility study is less worrisome to me if it stops at the accuracy of the end diagnosis. I think my concern is how many years you have to follow patients to be able to start seeing how that differential diagnosis ends in outcomes when there's a lot of real world data that you could use to extrapolate that. But I don't know if that's acceptable or not. Yeah,
and for the most part, it's not. And so I think I have a perfect example to illustrate that. This has been a challenge for the marketplace. So Laura, it's the medical policy. I just linked it in there, which is for gene expression profiling and as well as protein biomarkers for prostate cancer, because this essentially hits upon that point for that outcomes and how long you have to follow. So, you know, it's important, I think, for, you know, I think PICC and everyone to understand that you have to really understand what target you're going for and what outcomes your interest, because the whole issue, because there are multiple, you know, algorithms, you know, machine learning algorithms already out there for prostate cancer, but it's not a good starting point because, you know, based on the evidence review, you know, 30% of men die with prostate cancer incidentally. So when you just do a random, you know, autopsy, 30% of men have prostate cancer, but do not die of prostate cancer, right? So if you're trying to, you know, go after, for example, say the prostate cancer market, it's a really, really high bar to try to prove that you can actually improve outcomes. If the, you know, if the patient population in this particular case are typically going to die of something else other than the cancer that they have, right? So, you know, if you scroll down a little bit, Laura, you'll see how the blues, or, you know, a lot of them evaluate. It's under policy statement. Yeah, right there. So it said use of gene expression analysis and protein biomarkers to guide management of prostate cancer is considered investigational in all situations. So basically, there's zero utility from the payer standpoint, right? So yeah, so there are, and payers are really reluctant to take surrogate endpoints. And one example I can share from that realm is when the payers typically, at least upfront for the initial policy, were not willing to cover the Duchenne muscular dystrophy drug, you know, Exondys 56, which is a, you know, oligo that does, you know, exon skipping, because the whole surrogate endpoint of interest that was a basis for the accelerated approval by FDA was increase in dystrophin levels. So now you fast forward 4 years after that initial approval, the confirmatory study showed that there's zero clinical benefit from, you know, a 1 to 2% increase in dystrophin levels. So, you know, payers are really reluctant to take some sort of surrogate endpoint and create what we call a chain of evidence. You have this initial result, and then you can try to extrapolate moving forward, because for something like Exondys 51, it's $375,000 per year, you know, per patient. And so, you know, payers, where we're saying we're looking at the evidence, we don't really see how this is going to, you've shown, yes, that you're able to increase the truncated, you know, dystrophin protein in these, you know, Duchenne muscular dystrophy boys, but you haven't shown me that there's any improvement in, or any clinical benefits or improvement in outcome. And so then the confirmatory study that was finally published, or, you know, I think sometime last year or early this year, stated that, yes, once we did the functional test, there was actually no statistically significant improvement in, you know, between the patients. So direct evidence is always better.
Sounds like a use case is going to be really important, like in the right use.
Yeah. that's why my thoughts for prostate cancer are, because I've talked with all the companies that have all these different tests for prostate, and just pretty much when I was on the payer side, I said, you haven't shown me how you've shown me that you're trying to stratify these men into different risk categories, but what actually happens to them? Do they end up getting more aggressive therapy or less aggressive, like less aggressive treatments? And do they actually do better at the end of the day? And there's really no direct way to prove that, because the whole this is I think one of the perfect or extreme cases, because it's really hard to show how you can improve that outcomes for prostate cancer if 30% of guys or men at autopsy have prostate cancer, right? So
Right.
how much better can you try to make it?
Interesting. I'm trying to be cognizant. I think, Esther, we have about 5 more minutes.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
is that right? So I'm trying to be cognizant of that and try to come up with some, concrete, maybe next steps. Sounds like using a use case like prostate cancer, maybe to then go.
Well, it depends what use case, right? Like whether you find cancer or not is one thing, and whether you can say how aggressive or not it is another. But I think the whole industry stands to benefit more from even just getting digital pathology reimbursed, which is why I talked about the MRI thing earlier. Maybe that boat has sailed, because and the other piece. So we know that what about payers willing to reimburse a product that would, better predict which patients should have this additional test or that therapy that would eventually save them costs? Right? If a bunch of, like, for example, HER2 positive breast cancer, like 18% of women don't respond, even if they're HER2 positive, right? Like if somehow you were able to tell that like these patients wouldn't respond, I would think that payers would be interested in covering that, right? So that patients don't get this expensive treatment if it's not going to work for them.
Yeah, and I think the way to kind of align this is, what I did was I linked one policy that's an example of something that is covered. So this is breast cancer. So, exactly what you were mentioning. So that particular use case is very well established, but that still took 10 years of long-term outcomes data to really prove that out. So in the case of prostate cancer, I think we can use that as a example to, I think, give everyone on PIcc, or as an example of a use case that it's almost impossible to prove. And then the policy that I just linked in chat right now is an example of, a use case where there is that demonstrated improvements in outcome. In this particular case for breast cancer, it is being able to make that risk benefit call for whether chemo is needed, whether adjuvant chemo is needed when you have breast cancer. So you can avoid chemo, but still 10 years of long-term outcomes data to show that yes, you can safely forego chemo, because 10 years down the road, based on the prognosis that you have, the risks do not outweigh the benefits of giving you chemo up front, right? Because if you get chemo, you might have chances for secondary malignancies and all the side effects. So, the breast cancer scenario, the policy right here is an example where it took a long time, but it was a good construct, because you knew you're later on able to prove that this particular patient population can do better. And the prostate cancer example is one where it's going to probably be nearly impossible to prove that out, because men are going to, like, the population for prostate cancer is older men, that they're going to die of something else, right? So breast cancer is a good, I would say, use case for something that was able to secure coverage, and then prostate cancer is one that will be a very, very difficult, if not impossible, path.
You mean for prognosis, right?
What was that?
Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I meant for the prognosis use case.
Yeah, for the prognosis use case, but the specific management decision is whether or not to give adjuvant chemo, right? So that is exactly what that test is designed to do, because that long-term risk. But then you actually have to collect that long-term outcomes to then prove that out. But then once you have that, then I think the clinicians, the professional society guidelines, whether it's NCCN, will actually adopt those in. But until that direct evidence is available, there won't be that high level of society endorsement for technology. So that's another thing that I didn't mention. But yeah, the societies, the large influential societies do have some influence on the payers as well.
Yeah. So scoping it back, like we have to leave because it closes in 50 seconds. Scoping it back, I think what I heard is that we want to work on digital pathology in general by trying to find out what is the evidence that we would need, that's short term, that we can already do. And then the midterm, I think, is more likely looking into what can we accomplish with regards to some use cases in digital pathology. But I also want to make sure that it's not too specific on use cases. It's more like, okay, how should we approach this? Do we compare it to standard of care? And then I think the last one is really like a longitudinal study probably, or something that we have to follow up patients.
Yep, I agree with that.
And then we are closing. See you in the plan.